The silence in our living room is a living thing. It has weight. It presses down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. The air, usually filled with the faint scent of lemon oil from the polished wood floors and the lavender I grow just outside the window, smells only of stale betrayal. Mark sits across from me, his posture relaxed, almost casual, as if he's discussing a business merger and not the complete demolition of our 14-year marriage. He has just finished a long, meandering speech about self-discovery and finding his truth, a speech full of therapy speak he must have rehearsed with her. He thinks he's being gentle. He thinks he's letting me down easy. He is a man setting a fire and calling it a source of warmth. He looks at me, his eyes full of a strange, placid pity, and delivers the final, crushing blow. He says, "Honestly, you should thank her. Clara, she helped me realize I wasn't living authentically. She woke me up. In a way, she's setting you free, too." The words hang there. You should thank her. My mind latches onto the phrase, turning it over and over. Thank her. Thank the woman who has been sleeping in a bed paid for with money I helped earn. Thank the woman who receives jewelry bought with a credit card that is supposed to be for our shared future. Thank the woman who has been eating at restaurants we were supposed to try together, her laughter echoing in spaces that should have held mine. The absurdity is so profound, it's almost funny. A hysterical laugh bubbles in my throat, but I swallow it down. It would taste like acid. I look at him, this stranger wearing my husband's face. The face I have woken up to for nearly 5,000 mornings. The lines around his eyes, once crinkles of laughter I'd trace with my finger, now look like cracks in a cheap facade. He's waiting for my reaction. He expects tears. He expects screaming, maybe even begging. He has braced himself for the messy, emotional fallout that he, in his magnanimous, newfound authenticity, will patiently endure before he can walk away, guilt-free. He has no idea that the storm has already passed. He has no idea he's standing in the wreckage, believing he's still the one holding the hammer. If you've ever felt the ground crumble beneath your feet, leaving you in a free fall you never saw coming, tell me about it in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this is your first time here with me, please subscribe. Knowing you're out there helps more than you'll ever know. It wasn't always like this. The silence in our house used to be comfortable. It was the easy quiet of two people who knew each other's rhythms so well that words were often unnecessary. I remember the early days, not just of our marriage, but of our business. We were a unit, a team. Mark was the visionary, the one who could look at a dilapidated piece of land and see a thriving community. He had the ambition, the drive, the charisma to make investors believe in his dream. I was the one who gave the dream its soul. As a landscape architect, I designed the spaces between the buildings. I created the gardens, the parks, the walkways where life would happen. I believed that a home wasn't just four walls, but the earth it sat upon, the trees that offered it shade, the flowers that marked the passing of seasons. We built our company, Terra Firma Developments, from nothing. Our first office was a spare bedroom in our tiny rented apartment, the walls covered in blueprints and financial projections. We worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee and a shared, unwavering belief in what we were creating. Our own home was our masterpiece. We bought a plot of land overlooking a small, wooded valley. It took us 2 years to build the house, and I designed every inch of the surrounding landscape. I chose every tree, every stone, every perennial. The garden was my love letter to our future. There was the stone patio where we'd drink wine on summer evenings, watching the fireflies rise from the woods. The kitchen garden, where I grew tomatoes and basil and rosemary, the scents clinging to my hands after an afternoon of weeding. There was the weeping cherry tree I planted on our 5th anniversary, its blossoms a riot of pale pink every April. I thought of the children we would have, them playing hide-and-seek among the hydrangeas, their laughter mingling with the buzzing of bees. The house and the garden were more than just property. They were the physical manifestation of our partnership, of our love. Every nail hammered, every seed planted, was a promise. Mark used to see it that way, too. He'd come home from a stressful day of negotiating deals and zoning permits, and he'd find me in the garden, my hands covered in dirt. He'd wrap his arms around me from behind, rest his chin on my shoulder, and just breathe. He'd whisper into my hair, "This is what it's all for. You make everything beautiful." He used to look at me with a kind of wonder, as if I were a rare and precious thing. He admired my passion, my connection to the earth. He said it grounded him. In the mornings, he'd bring me coffee in bed, exactly how I liked it, a splash of oat milk, no sugar. We had our rituals, our private language, the shorthand of a long and happy partnership. We were invincible. We were forever. The first crack was almost invisible, so small I could have mistaken it for a shadow. It was about 6 months ago. Mark started working later. It wasn't unusual at first. We were in the final stages of a big condo project downtown, the Onyx, our most ambitious development yet. The stress was high, but the late nights became more frequent, stretching into weekends. He'd come home smelling of a cologne he never wore and a faint, unfamiliar perfume that wasn't mine. When I asked about it, he'd wave a hand dismissively. "Networking event," he'd say. "Had a schmooze with some investors at a cigar bar." He didn't smoke cigars. When I pointed that out, he got defensive. "God, can you give me some space? I'm killing myself to get this project finished for us, and you're interrogating me about how I smell?" I felt a flash of guilt.
He was right.
He was under immense pressure. I was being needy, paranoid. I apologized. I made him his favorite dinner. I let it go. But the cracks kept appearing. He became fiercely protective of his phone. It was always face down on the table or in his pocket. He, who used to leave it lying around for hours, now carried it with him even to the bathroom. He set a new passcode, claiming it was for corporate security. We had run our company for over a decade without this level of corporate security. One evening, he was in the shower and his phone, which he'd left on the nightstand, buzzed. It lit up. A message preview flashed on the screen from someone named Clara. It just said, "Thinking of you. Tonight was amazing." My heart stopped. I stared at the screen, the words burning into my retinas. Clara. Who was Clara? An investor? A colleague? The message felt too intimate for a professional relationship. The shower turned off. I quickly looked away from the phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. He came out of the bathroom, a towel around his waist, humming. He saw me sitting on the bed, my posture rigid. "Everything okay?" he asked, his voice casual. I couldn't speak. I just nodded. The lie felt like a stone in my throat. That night, I lay beside him in the dark, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of his breathing. He was sleeping peacefully, a man without a care in the world. I had never felt more alone. The comfortable silence of our home had been replaced by a new, terrifying quiet, the silence of secrets. The inciting incident, the moment the hairline cracks fractured into a deep, undeniable chasm, came in the form of a credit card statement. It arrived in the mail, a bland white envelope that held the kind of ugly truth you can't unsee. I was paying our bills online, a routine task I did on the first of every month. I opened the statement for our joint account, the one we used for household expenses and personal splurges. And there it was. A charge from a high-end jewelry store downtown, a place called Bijou. The amount was staggering. Nearly $5,000. It was dated 3 weeks prior. My birthday had been 2 months ago. Our anniversary wasn't for another 4. Christmas was a distant thought. I stared at the line item, my mind racing. Maybe it was a surprise for me? An early anniversary gift? But Mark was terrible at keeping secrets. He got too excited, always dropping hints. There had been no hints. I decided to wait, to give him the benefit of the doubt. For 3 days, I said nothing. I watched him, searching his face for any sign of a hidden surprise, a playful secret. There was nothing. He was distant, preoccupied, his smiles not quite reaching his eyes. The weight of that $5,000 charge sat on my chest, heavy and cold. Finally, I couldn't stand it anymore. I approached him one evening as he was loosening his tie after a long day. I tried to sound casual, breezy. Hey, I was going over the credit card bill, and I saw a charge from Bijou. Did you pick up something nice? His reaction was instantaneous. A flicker of panic in his eyes, quickly masked. He forced a laugh.
Oh, that.
Yeah, I forgot to tell you. I bought a necklace for my mom. Her birthday's coming up. His mom's birthday was in January. It was June. The lie was so lazy, so insulting in its lack of effort. He didn't even care enough to make it a good one. Her birthday was 5 months ago, Mark. I said, my voice quiet flat. He didn't miss a beat. I know. It was a late gift. You know how busy I've been. I saw it and thought of her. Just decided to get it. He walked past me towards the kitchen, already dismissing the conversation. Want a glass of wine? He called over his shoulder. I stood there, rooted to the spot in our hallway. The walls, painted a warm, comforting sage green that I had chosen, suddenly felt like they were closing in on me. He thought I was an idiot. Or, worse, he just didn't care if I knew he was lying. That night, the doubt turned into a sick certainty. The search for truth became an obsession. My life split into two. There was the version I performed for the world, the supportive wife, the talented architect, the successful business partner. I smiled at dinner parties, discussed project timelines in board meetings, and tended to my garden, my hands moving through the familiar motions of pruning and planting on autopilot. Then there was the secret life I lived in the shadows of my own home. I became a ghost, a detective, a creature of the night. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. As soon as Mark's breathing deepened into a steady rhythm, I would slip out of bed. The first time I picked up his phone, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold it. My heart pounded against my ribs like a trapped bird. I felt disgusting, ashamed. This wasn't me. I wasn't this person. But the need to know was a physical craving stronger than my pride. His new passcode was easy enough to guess. It was the completion date for the Onyx project. Of course. His work. His legacy. I found the text with Clara. He had deleted most of the thread, but he'd missed a few. They were disguised under a man's name in his contacts, Chris from accounting, but the tone was undeniably intimate. Can't stop thinking about you, miss your laugh. Counting down the minutes, each message was a small, sharp stab to my heart. I scrolled through his photo gallery, my stomach churning. I found a picture of a woman's hand, a delicate gold necklace with a small diamond pendant resting against her collarbone. It was the necklace from Bijou. Her hand was not his mother's. I could see the edge of a tattoo on her wrist, a small, intricate wave. I memorized it. I spent hours online, a digital bloodhound on a cold trail. Clara wasn't a common name in our circles. I searched social media, looking for connections to our company, to our friends. Nothing. It was like she didn't exist. The snooping hollowed me out. I lost weight. Dark circles formed under my eyes, which I carefully concealed with makeup each morning. I felt a constant, low-grade hum of anxiety in my veins. Every time his phone buzzed, I flinched. Every time he said he was working late, I imagined him with her. The man I loved was transforming into a monster in my mind, and I was transforming into someone I didn't recognize, suspicious, bitter, and consumed by a rage that had no outlet. One evening, I tried to breach the wall between us. I tried to be the wife I used to be. I made a reservation at our favorite Italian restaurant, the one where he proposed. I put on a dress he loved. I thought maybe, if I could just remind him of what we had, of the foundation we had built, he would snap out of it. He was distracted all through dinner, constantly checking his phone under the table. Finally, I put my fork down and looked at him. Mark, are we okay? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Things feel different between us, he sighed, a long, exasperated sound. Honey, we're fine. I'm just buried in work. You're being a little paranoid lately, don't you think? It's all this stress. Maybe you should take a vacation, go to a spa or something. He was gaslighting me, turning my valid fears into a symptom of my own emotional instability. He made me feel crazy. And the worst part was, a small part of me almost believed him. I wanted to believe him. I went home that night and cried in the shower so he wouldn't hear me, the hot water mixing with my tears, washing away the last vestiges of the naive, trusting woman I used to be. The early struggles were a lonely, maddening descent into a fog of doubt and deceit. I was fighting a war he refused to even acknowledge was happening. The challenges began to escalate, each one a new brick in the wall he was building between us. His lies became more elaborate, his absences more frequent. He started using our business as a shield, a convenient and impenetrable excuse for his behavior. Bored dinner, he'd text late at night. Early meeting with the city planners, site visit out of town, have to stay overnight. I knew our business inside and out. I knew the project schedules. I knew there were no board dinners on Tuesday nights. I knew the city planners didn't hold meetings at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. But if I questioned him, he would accuse me of not trusting him, of undermining our professional partnership. He expertly twisted my legitimate suspicions into a betrayal of our business, our shared dream. He was weaponizing the very thing we had built together against me. The isolation was crushing. Our friends, who had once been our friends, were slowly being co-opted. He would arrange get-togethers without me, citing my stress or a migraine I was supposedly having. He was preemptively poisoning the well, painting me as an unstable, overly emotional wife so that if I ever did speak out, I wouldn't be believed. I saw it in their eyes when we were all together, a flicker of pity, a careful handling of me, as if I were a fragile object on the verge of shattering. They'd ask, "How are you holding up?" Mark says the pressure of the new project is really getting to you. He was curating a narrative, and I was the designated villain, or at best, the tragic, hysterical victim. One Saturday, he told me he had to go to the office to finalize some paperwork for the Onyx. I knew it was a lie. Our office was closed on weekends unless there was a major emergency. A few hours after he left, our close friend, Sarah, called me. "Hey, I'm so sorry you're not feeling well," she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. "Mark just told us you came down with a terrible flu. We were all so looking forward to the wine tasting." Wine tasting? Mark had said nothing about a wine tasting. My blood ran cold. "Oh, yeah," I managed to say, my voice hoarse. It came on so suddenly. "I'm just resting in bed." We spoke for a few more minutes, the conversation a blur of meaningless pleasantries. After I hung up, I sat on the edge of our bed, the phone heavy in my hand. He wasn't just lying to me. He was erasing me from our life, one social event at a time. He was with her at a wine tasting with our friends, and I was at home, sick with a phantom flu he had invented. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He wasn't just having an affair, he was beta testing his new life, with his new partner, in the shell of our old one. The rage I felt was so pure, so potent, it almost made me dizzy. The garden outside my window, my beautiful, orderly sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage. The blooming roses seemed to mock me with their vibrant, oblivious life. The financial deceptions grew bolder. I started noticing strange expenses on the business accounts he managed. Dinners at restaurants for two, disguised as client entertainment, charges from boutique hotels listed as overnight travel for site inspection. He was sloppy, arrogant, convinced I would never look that closely. He underestimated me. He always had. He saw me as the creative, the artist, the softer side of our partnership. He thought I lived in a world of flower petals and color palettes, not profit and loss statements. He forgot that I was a co-founder of this company. I had a mind for numbers, too. I had a spine of steel he had never bothered to notice. I began to quietly document everything. I created a secret folder on my computer, password protected. I downloaded bank statements, cross-referenced receipts with his calendar, and took screenshots of his expense reports. Each piece of evidence was a small, cold stone. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I gathered my materials with a grim, methodical focus. The sadness was still there, a deep, aching wound in my chest. But now it was accompanied by something else, a cold, clear sense of purpose. He was trying to dismantle my life. He had no idea I was drawing up the blueprints for his. The midpoint, The moment the world tilted on its axis and my mission crystallized, happened on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. Mark had called that morning to say he was stuck in back-to-back meetings all day and wouldn't be home for dinner. His voice had a strained, artificial cheerfulness that set my teeth on edge. The lie was so familiar, so worn, it was practically transparent. This time, I didn't just sit with my suspicion. I acted on it. I got in my car. I didn't have a plan. I just started driving towards downtown, a vague idea of checking the office parking garage nagging at me. But as I got closer, a different, more chilling thought took hold. The Onyx. Our new luxury condo building. It was nearly complete, with the first tenants scheduled to move in next month. It was his baby, the project he had poured all his energy into for the last 2 years. I parked a block away, the rain drumming a frantic rhythm on the roof of my car. I watched the main entrance, my heart pounding a counter-rhythm against my ribs. For 20 minutes, nothing. I started to feel foolish, paranoid, just like he always said I was. I was about to start the engine and go home, to retreat back into my lonely misery. And then I saw him. He walked out of the lobby, holding a large black umbrella. He wasn't alone. A woman was tucked under his arm, laughing at something he'd said. She was tall, with sleek, dark hair that fell to her shoulders. Even from a distance, I could see she was beautiful. And on her wrist, as she lifted a hand to brush her hair from her face, I saw it. A small, dark shape, the tattoo of the wave. Clara. It was her. My breath caught in my throat. It was one thing to see texts and photos. It was another to see her in the flesh, tucked into my husband's side, walking out of the building that was supposed to be our crowning achievement. They didn't get into his car. Instead, they walked down the street, turned the corner, and disappeared. My hands were shaking, but my mind was unnervingly clear. He wasn't just visiting the building. He was with her in our building. I waited until they were gone, then I drove my car into the underground resident parking garage. The security guard at the gate, a man named George who I'd spoken with a dozen times during site visits, waved me through with a friendly smile. "Afternoon, Mrs. Davis. Here to check on the final touches." I forced a smile back. "Something like that, George." I parked in a dark corner, and I waited. An hour passed. Then 2. The rain stopped, and the air in the concrete garage grew damp and heavy. Finally, I saw his car pull in. He got out, alone this time. He was whistling. I ducked down in my seat, my heart in my throat. He got into his car and drove away, heading in the direction of our home, where he would no doubt arrive late and exhausted from his back-to-back meetings. I got out of my car and walked to the resident elevator. I knew the master codes. I was, after all, a partner in this company. I went to the concierge desk in the main lobby, my face a mask of professional calm. "Hi, David," I said to the young man at the desk. "I need to check the occupancy log for the 7th floor. Just want to confirm the cleaning crew finished the final prep on the penthouse units," he typed on his computer. "All clear, Mrs. Davis. The only occupied unit on that floor currently is 7B. A Ms. Clara Jensen moved some things in last week. Early move-in. Mr. Davis approved it himself. Clara Jensen. 7B. The name and the apartment number slammed into me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just a fling. It wasn't a series of clandestine meetings in cheap hotels. He had installed her here. He had moved his mistress into our company's flagship property. He was using the assets we had built together, the symbols of our shared success, to house the woman he was betraying me with. The audacity, the sheer, profound arrogance of it, stole my breath. In that cold, sterile lobby, surrounded by the polished marble and brushed steel that I had helped select, my sadness didn't just turn to anger. It underwent a kind of alchemy. It hardened, cooled, and sharpened into something new. It became a weapon. My purpose was no longer just to survive this. It was to win. The days that followed were a blur of quiet, meticulous work. My grief was a constant, low hum beneath the surface, but on top, my mind was a whirlwind of focused activity. I stopped being a wife. I became a forensic accountant, an investigator, a strategist. My design studio, once a place of creativity and light, became my war room. I locked the door, pulled the blinds, and dove headfirst into the digital labyrinth of terra firma developments. I wasn't just looking for proof of the affair anymore. That was a given. I was looking for the mechanics of his deception, the financial architecture of his betrayal. I started with apartment 7B. I pulled the lease agreement from our corporate server. My blood ran cold as I read it. The rent was listed at 50% of the market rate. The reason cited was the Friends and Family Discount, a program we had established for employees and their immediate relatives. Clara Jensen was listed as the tenant, and the employee who had authorized the discount, the one who had co-signed the lease and personally guaranteed the payments, was Mark Davis, my husband. It was a flagrant violation of company policy. The discount was for parents, siblings, children, not for whatever Clara was. But it was worse than that. I started digging into the building's operating expenses, the accounts Mark personally managed. I found invoices from a high-end furniture store, coded as staging expenses for model units, but we had used a different company for our staging, a contract I had personally negotiated. I called the furniture store, pretending to be Mark's assistant, and asked them to confirm the delivery address for the invoices. They confirmed it. Apartment 7B, the Onyx. He had furnished her entire apartment on the company's dime. Then there were the client dinners at restaurants I knew were her favorites. I'd seen them tagged in her few public social media photos. The corporate car service, trips that matched the times he was with her. It was a systematic, calculated embezzlement. Small amounts here and there, buried in the massive budget of a multi-million-dollar project, all adding up to a life he had built for her, paid for by us. The sheer scale of it was suffocating. For a moment, I felt the familiar despair wash over me. He had entangled our personal and professional lives so completely that a clean break seemed impossible. To expose him would be to risk damaging the company I had poured my heart and soul into. The scandal could scare off investors, tarnish our reputation, the reputation I had worked so hard to build. He had me trapped. He had built the cage and locked the door, and I was inside. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of the monitor illuminating the tears welling in my eyes. I felt utterly, hopelessly lost. The blueprints for the gardens at the Onyx were pinned to the wall beside my desk. I had designed a rooftop sanctuary, a place of peace and beauty high above the city. The irony was a bitter pill. I had been designing a haven for the residents, while my own partner was using the very same building to orchestrate my personal hell. I wanted to scream. I wanted to take a sledgehammer to every wall in this house, to every beautiful thing we had built together. I wanted to burn it all to the ground. And then, as I stared at the corporate bylaws on my screen, a single sentence caught my eye. It was from a section on fiduciary duty, a clause that I had insisted our lawyer add when we first incorporated, much to Mark's amusement. He had called me adorably paranoid. The clause was clear. Any officer of the corporation found to be willfully misusing company assets or authority for significant personal gain, unrelated to the business interests of terra firma developments, shall be subject to immediate termination and forfeiture of all non-vested shares. Forfeiture of all non-vested shares. We had a vesting schedule. A significant portion of Mark's ownership stake in the company, tied to the completion of the Onyx, hadn't vested yet. He wouldn't just lose his job. He would lose a substantial part of his net worth. My paranoia, the detail he had once found so amusing, was about to become his undoing. That was the turning point. The tears stopped. The despair receded, replaced by a glacial calm. The architect in me took over. I wasn't just gathering stones anymore. I was building a case. A precise, irrefutable, and devastating case. I printed every fraudulent expense report, every incriminating invoice, every email where he authorized payments that benefited Clara Jensen. I compiled the lease agreement, the company policy on discounts, and the corporate bylaws. I put it all into a neat, tabbed binder. The evidence was overwhelming. It was a monument to his arrogance. I picked up the phone and called our corporate lawyer, a man named Arthur Vance. He was old school, meticulous, and fiercely loyal to the company itself, not to any one person within it. "Arthur," I said, my voice steady and even. "I need to schedule a meeting with you. I'm bringing documentation regarding a serious breach of fiduciary duty by a senior partner." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'll clear my schedule," he said, his tone grim. I hung up the phone. The war had begun. I was no longer the wife, the victim, the ghost in my own home. I was the architect of his reckoning. And I would design it with the same precision and care that I put into every one of my gardens. It would be thorough. It would be ruthless. And it would be beautiful. The next 2 weeks were a masterclass in compartmentalization. I moved through my life with a placid, almost serene exterior. I went to work. I spoke to Mark about trivialities, the leaking faucet, the grocery list. I smiled when he told me about his stressful day. Inside, I was a machine. I met with Arthur twice. We went over the evidence piece by piece. His initial grim expression had shifted to one of cold, professional fury. "This is not just grounds for termination, Amelia," he told me during our second meeting, his voice low. "This is fraud. The company could press charges. I had a decision to make. Did I want to send the father of my future unborn children to jail? No. I didn't want him in prison. I wanted him gone. I wanted him stripped of the power he had used to hurt me. I wanted him to lose the company he had valued more than our marriage. No charges," I said. "But he's out. Immediately. And the forfeiture clause is non-negotiable." Arthur nodded, his eyes showing a new respect. "I'll draft the severance agreement. It will be a termination for cause. He'll get nothing but his vested shares and a kick out the door." We devised a plan. I would confront him first, giving him one last chance to tell the truth on his own terms. Then, regardless of what he said, the hammer would fall. Arthur would convene an emergency meeting with the other 2 board members, minority partners who had always been more loyal to me and my design aesthetic than to Mark's aggressive expansion tactics. He would present the evidence. The termination would be effective immediately. While that meeting was happening, a process server, accompanied by company security, would deliver an eviction notice to Ms. Clara Jensen at apartment 7B. Her illegal lease was null and void. She would have 24 hours to vacate the premises. The final piece of the plan was the most satisfying. Arthur advised me to speak with Clara directly. Not out of kindness, but as a strategic move. I called her. She was hesitant at first, her voice wary. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I simply laid out the facts. "Clara," I said, my voice calm and businesslike. "My name is Amelia Davis. I am Mark's wife and a founding partner of Terra Firma Developments. I know about the apartment. I know about the furniture, the expenses. I have all the documentation. The company is terminating Mark's employment for fraud, and your lease is being voided. You will be evicted tomorrow." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. "However," I continued, "Mark co-signed your lease and the fraudulent furniture purchases. The company has a strong civil case against him to recoup those funds. If he's uncooperative, you could be named as a co-defendant in that suit. Or you could cooperate. Forward me every email, every text message you have from him that discusses the apartment, the money, anything he paid for. In exchange, the company will release you from all liability and will not pursue any legal action against you." She started to cry then, soft, pathetic sobs. "He told me he was separated," she whispered. "He told me you two were just business partners, that the divorce was almost final," the classic lines. He had sold her a fantasy, just as he had sold me one for years. She was just another one of his developments, a project to be managed. "I'm sure he did," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "You have 1 hour to decide. My lawyer's email is..." She didn't even wait for me to finish. "I'll do it," she said, her voice thick with tears and desperation. "I'll send you everything." Within 20 minutes, my inbox was flooded. Texts, emails, even screenshots of bank transfers he'd made to her personal account. Her loyalty was as cheap as the rent he'd arranged for her. It was done. All the pieces were in place. All that was left was the final confrontation. And now here we are, back in our living room, the beautiful room that I designed, with its view of the garden that I nurtured. He is looking at me, his face full of that insufferable, gentle pity. He has just delivered his soul-crushing line. You should thank her. I let the silence stretch. I let him sit in his smug victory, his belief that he is in complete control of this narrative. I watched the confidence in his eyes, the relaxed set of his shoulders. He thinks this is the end of our story, and he is the one writing it. I take a slow, deep breath. I look directly into his eyes, and the placid mask I have been wearing for weeks finally drops. My expression is not one of sadness or anger. It's something else entirely. It's the calm, focused look of a predator that knows the hunt is already over. I did, I say. My voice is quiet, but it cuts through the silence, like a shard of glass. Mark blinks. His serene expression falters, replaced by a flicker of confusion.
What?
What did you say? I said, I did thank her. I repeat, my voice gaining strength. I spoke to Clara this morning, actually. We had a very productive conversation. The color begins to drain from his face. This is not in his script. He opens his mouth to speak, but no words come out. He looks like a fish gasping for air. She was incredibly helpful. I continue, my tone conversational, as if I'm discussing the weather. Once my lawyer explained the legal ramifications of accepting benefits from corporate fraud, she became a very open book. She was kind enough to forward me every single text and email you ever sent her regarding the apartment, the furniture, the money. It turns out, when faced with the choice between loyalty to you and being named in a civil lawsuit, her decision-making process became remarkably clear. I lean forward, placing my hands on the coffee table between us. I push a slim, black binder across the polished surface. It slides to a stop just in front of him. That's a copy of everything. The fraudulent lease for apartment 7B you signed off on, a clear violation of the friends and family policy. The invoices for her furniture that you coded as model unit staging, the expense reports for your romantic dinners, listed as client meetings, it's all in there. It's very thorough. He stares at the binder as if it's a venomous snake. He doesn't touch it. His breathing has become shallow, rapid. The confident man who sat down to benevolently end his marriage is gone, replaced by a cornered, terrified animal. What is this, Amelia? He whispers, his voice a hoarse rasp. This is your severance package, I say, my voice as cold and hard as steel. Right now, as we speak, our lawyer, Arthur Vance, is in an emergency board meeting presenting this exact binder of evidence to our partners. Your termination for cause was approved unanimously about 10 minutes ago. Your corporate accounts have been frozen. Your access to the company servers has been revoked. His face has gone from pale to a ghastly shade of gray. His eyes are wide with disbelief and horror. You can't do this, he stammers. We built that company. I built that company, we built it. I correct him gently. And you used it as your personal piggy bank to fund your fare. You betrayed the company, Mark.
And you betrayed me.
Did you really think I wouldn't find out? Did you think I was that stupid? That I'd just cry and pack my bags and let you have everything you'd stolen from us? I stand up and walk over to the large window overlooking the garden. The sun is beginning to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. You know, I say, my back to him, the saddest part is how little you thought of me. You saw me as the gardener, the decorator, someone to make things pretty. You forgot I'm also an architect. I know how to read a blueprint. And I know how to build a structure that is solid, sound, and able to withstand any storm. I also know how to spot a fatal flaw in a foundation. I turn back to face him. He has collapsed back into the couch, his face in his hands.
So, yes.
I thanked Clara. She's losing you today. And, thanks to the eviction notice that was served by a process server an hour ago, she's also losing her illegally subsidized apartment. She has 24 hours to vacate. I guess you'll have to find a new place to live. Together, I let that final, brutal fact settle in the air between us. The gun he thought he was pointing at my heart had been pointed at his own head all along. And I was the one who had just pulled the trigger. The aftermath was not a fiery explosion, but the slow, quiet collapse of a condemned building. Mark didn't fight. The evidence was so absolute, So damning, there was no ground for him to stand on. He was a ghost at the company for the next 2 days, packing his personal effects from his office under the watchful eye of a security guard. People I had known for years averted their eyes when they saw me, unsure of what to say. They didn't need to say anything. The story had ripped through the small world of our city's real estate community. Mark wasn't just a cheat. He was a fool and a thief. His reputation, the currency he valued above all else, was incinerated. The divorce was swift. His lawyer took one look at the evidence I had and advised him to accept my first offer. He walked away with his vested shares, a fraction of what he'd expected, and nothing else. The house was mine. The business was, for all intents and purposes, mine to lead. The first few weeks were surreal. The silence in the house was different now. It was no longer the heavy, oppressive silence of secrets, but of vast, echoing emptiness. His presence lingered in the smallest things, the indentation on a side of the mattress, the single coffee mug left in the dishwasher, the scent of his shaving cream in the bathroom cabinet. I methodically purged the house of him. I packed his clothes, his books, his awards, into boxes and left them on the porch for him to collect. I hired painters and had them cover the warm sage green of our hallway in a crisp, clean white. I rearranged the furniture. I reclaimed the space, inch by painful inch. There was no joy in it, only a grim sense of necessity. This was not a victory lap, it was a salvage operation. I threw myself into my work. I rebranded the company, changing the name from Terra Firma Developments to Amelia Davis Design and Development. I wanted his name, his legacy, erased. I met with our investors, our partners, our team. I was honest. I didn't share the sordid details of the affair, but I was clear about the financial misconduct and the breach of trust. I laid out my vision for the future, a vision based on integrity, transparency, and sustainable, beautiful design. To my surprise and immense relief, they rallied around me. They had always respected my work, my aesthetic. It turned out Mark's aggressive, cutthroat style had made more enemies than I ever knew. My quiet, steady competence was a welcome change. There were moments, of course, when the grief would ambush me. I'd be walking through the garden, and I'd see the stone bench where we used to sit, and a wave of loss so profound would wash over me that it would bring me to my knees. I was not just mourning the man he became, but the man I thought he was. I was mourning the future we had designed together, the children whose laughter I had imagined in this very garden. That life was gone. It had been a mirage. The pain of that was a physical thing, a hollow ache deep in my bones. But I learned to sit with it. I learned that grief is not an enemy to be conquered, but a landscape to be navigated. I walked through it. Slowly, gradually, things began to change. The emptiness in the house started to feel less like a void and more like open space. It was quiet, but it was a peaceful quiet. I could read a book for hours without interruption. I could play my music as loud as I wanted. I could eat breakfast for dinner standing at the kitchen counter. The house was no longer a house. It was my home. One spring morning, about a year after he left, I was planting new seedlings in the garden. The sun was warm on my back, the soil was cool and damp in my hands. The weeping cherry tree we had planted on our anniversary was in full, glorious bloom. For a moment, a pang of sadness hit me. But then I looked at the tree, at its delicate, resilient blossoms, and I saw it differently. It wasn't a monument to a failed marriage anymore. It was just a beautiful tree. It had survived the winter. It had weathered the storms. And now it was blooming again on its own. And so was I. Rebuilding is a quiet, lonely process. But the foundations are stronger this time because I laid them myself, stone by careful stone. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to tear down a life to build a new one, I'd love to hear your version in the comments. Thanks for being here with me. Subscribing helps bring more of these stories to life.